Do, 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 do. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. How are you, Morgan?
Good morning, Nicholas. Happy Friday from a cloudy and potentially rainy, snowy, sleety day in Denver. Around here, it's sleet, basically. And then it'll be sunny tomorrow because that's how our winters are. So,
Who do we got joining us today?
yes, say hello if you're here. I believe this is a first combined stream. So, everyone who's commenting should be able to see each other's comments. Welcome. Uh, we're so happy to have you here on this Friday to talk through a hot topic. Nick, you've done a number of polls talking through different dimensions of this question. You've been chatting with people in DMs and calls. I've been chatting with people in DMs and calls. We've been doing research. And lo and behold, we have this very important question. What is an acceptable closing rate on sales?
Good morning, Kit. Good morning, Tiffany, Jeffrey. This was I'll call it what it is. This was a happy accident. I threw out a
True.
poll on last Sunday because I was curious. The premise of the whole show, that's how this all started, is I threw out a poll because I was curious. With this poll, I found out from the results that most people were curious what was an acceptable close rate, because over 40% of the people that responded just wanted to know. They wanted to stay part of that conversation. So I started reaching out to people, and the people that were very opinionated reached out to me and let me know what was up. And some fascinating things trickled out. And I think I won't bury the lead. I'll just tell you guys right off the bat. If you have where you start this point, where you start tracking is what makes the biggest difference on your closing rate. People keep telling me that it's based on your product line or service or the size of what you're selling, and it's bullshit. It's a vanity thing that they use to go and tell themselves that they fit in this box. And I have talked to enough people now with them opening their CRM and actually showing me numbers that there's about a 10% variance from high to low. Well, if it's lower than that, it's there's a problem. But what it comes down to is where they start tracking. And so this is what trickled out. If you have less than a 20% closing rate, your starting point is a name on a list. Or somebody booked a meeting with you, or somebody booked a demo. But essentially, it's name on a list. That's it. If you have something better than 50%, you've actually identified a solution together with that customer, and you're putting a proposal together, and you start tracking from that point. If it's below that, there's a problem. If somebody's getting something higher than 20% and they're doing this, that's somebody you should be talking to because they're doing something very right. But now we hit this gray area between that 20 and 50. And this is the discovery call. This is the qualification call. And so the biggest difference here is, how are you qualifying? Is it firmographic fit? Is it psychographic fit? Are you going beyond just, are they in the right industry? Do they have the right head count? Are they getting the right growth? Am I talking to the right department? Am I talking to the right persona in that company? To need and timeline, so typical BANT. I really like using Medic because it also helps with my account strategy.
And
But
what's
this
MEDIC
is
stand for, Nick?
I'll have to go. I wish I had it written
I'm sorry, I
down.
didn't need to put you on the spot.
No,
I
it's
know it's a
okay.
long acronym.
I have a cheat sheet, so if anybody wants it, they can let me know, and I can show them how I do my account strategy. But it's metrics, which is, so what is the economic impact of your solution for your prospect?
Mm-hmm.
So this is going beyond the bullshit vanity numbers, and this is like real. So if you looked at the past 100 customers, 20 customers, what is the average that they see in return? Economic buyer. Who is the person who will make the final decision to buy? Please, God, don't ask for them for the first thing on the phone. Because saying, hey, may I speak to the decision maker? It's not a compliment. Decision criteria. very critical. Which criteria will be important to influence the purchase? Technical, economic. And this will become individual. Like, depending on what persona you're talking to, they have different things they're judged on. So you'll have to change this and frame it a little bit differently depending on who that is. So keep that in mind. And also the company, especially the bigger they get, they'll have an overlapping strategic alternative that the strategy they're running, and it'll have to align with that as well.
Hmm.
Identify pain. Thank you very much for throwing that in there. Identify pain. So, what are the problems encountered by your prospect and therefore their needs? And champion. Champion is probably the one that you should write down the fastest because it is the low hanging fruit. It is where your account strategy should start every single time. But what I do is I use this to fill in the blanks and figure out what I need to know before I go and talk to someone. And
Hmm.
so you can only do so much hidden in the background trying to go and, lurk and find your way in. You got to talk to people. And sometimes it's not VPs and senior leadership. Sometimes it's, SDRs are a great source of information. Salespeople are a great source of information. I used to love talking to secretaries and EAs because they
Hmm.
knew what was going on better than almost anyone. But
Hmm.
this is the gray area that is making the biggest impact on sales is not knowing who to talk to and not knowing what a good fit is.
What I really love about what you just outlined, to summarize from my perspective at least, is generally speaking, most organizations, depending upon where they benchmark, is it a close rate based on a name on the list or just a lead? Or is it a close rate on a proposal? Or is it a close rate somewhere in between on a discovery qualification call? Is the primary driver of what you see as reported close rates. If somebody exceeds that benchmark, we've talked about 20% hopefully on leads and 50% plus on proposals. That's something to look into, figure out what they're doing well and why and who and all of the many dimensions there. And if they're underperforming that benchmark, then there's a lot of similar sorts of discovery questions you can ask the team as well to figure out why is that lower than this benchmark. But you and I have both seen, both on the comments from your polls and then lots of content that gets floating around LinkedIn, people reporting these absurdly high close rates of like 80%, 90% close. And what you're outlining is that's not a close on a name and an email from somebody that got, signed up for a white paper. That
Hmm.
is so high because the benchmark, or excuse me, the starting position for that close rate is much further down the funnel than other people's much lower close rates. It just depends
Yeah.
upon where the organization sets the starting line.
Yeah. It'd be like me and you going having a drag race. And I said, Morgan, jump in your car. You start here. I'm going to start somewhere else, and somebody else can start somewhere else. So all three of us are starting at different distances, going to the same finish line,
Hmm.
and then calling it a fair race.
Right.
It's still a race,
Hmm.
but there's a reason why they have a start and a finish on a drag strip. And your sales process should too. It doesn't matter. These numbers aren't to go and compare yourself against others. They're benchmarking to know if something's wrong. And so another thing is, if you're seeing a really low number, part of it is you might have a cheaper product. And I don't mean cheaper in quality. I'm talking like, maybe you're sub $500, maybe you're sub $5,000. I think and I have a metric sheet that I pulled from a venture capital firm.
Oh,
And
yes. Hmm.
so they say, because when you're selling something under $1,000, a lot of the time you cast a significantly wider net. So,
Hmm.
Morgan, with account based marketing or sales with account based sales development, you have tier one, tier two, tier three, and then like demand gen.
Hmm.
They're basically doing demand gen and calling it the same thing,
Yeah.
lead gen, right?
Yep.
The tighter your net, the more specific you're targeting, the better this number will be naturally because you're talking to people that are a better fit without even knowing any additional information.
Hmm.
So on under 1,000, it's very common for prospecting to be an MQL is 5%. When it's 1,000 to 5,000, they're showing 10%. 5,000
Mhm.
to 25,000 is about 15%.
And what's
25 to 50 is 20, and then 50 to 500 is 30.
And what's really interesting to me about this metrics, which I see, sadly, lots of sales teams don't have too much power over this. So for the marketers, I'm going to wag a finger really quick. Prospects are not marketing qualified leads. Those numbers are the percentage of marketing qualified leads out of your pool of prospects. So
Mhm.
if you have a low average contract value on average from this VC data, you should be disqualifying the super majority of them to be marketing qualified leads to be able to pass them off to sales. Because there's a lot of sayings, crap in, crap out. If you're feeding the sales team poor leads, then that's naturally going to influence that number that they can qualify anyways. And the main mistake that I see marketing teams make, and this is a result of incentives and metrics that marketing teams are measured on, is any prospect becomes a marketing qualified lead. So with even just the lowest measurable intent, and intent in all ways. There's a logo that shows up in one of your analytics tracking software that says somebody from this company visited your website. That's intent, apparently. And that's enough to say, hey, you should go talk to somebody from this account. To me, that's obviously not true. Obviously, they're just a prospect. And marketing needs to do a better job on the front end, qualifying those prospects and their intent and their um, willingness to interact with somebody on your site or somebody from your team before they actually make that handoff to sales, which is why inbound programs, and particularly demand generation programs that create a lot of inbound leads, uh, there's I just saw Jonathan's
Yeah.
comment too. That's very funny. That inbound leads are really high intent leads because they've come to your website and then they filled out a form, for example, or they've booked a meeting with one of the automation tools out there and said, hey, I want to talk to somebody. That automatically becomes a marketing qualified lead because there's a lot of measurable high intent there. It's obvious they want to talk with someone. But the more that you feed poorly qualified leads, that puts the onus on the sales team to do a better job of actual qualification on the front end, which will that's to that 20% figure of uh, and that will influence closing rates if that's not done well, if sales qualification is not done well.
So, question from the marketing side, or to
Yes.
question the marketing side, I guess would be a better way of phrasing this. So, if sales' job is to qualify in person or through an interaction,
Mm.
should marketing then be allowing these prospects to self qualify in this process?
From a marketing perspective, maybe. I think it gets a little. I mean, my mind immediately went in like 10 different directions
It
on like,
depends.
well, on the industry and firmographic and some of the it depends thing that gets thrown around, which isn't a fair answer. So let me do my best to actually answer this. I think that let's start with the mistake companies make is they take any name and email that they get and then they say, we need to nurture this person. So they've set up an email automation sequence that sends out to that person a white paper and a follow up. And eventually, if they interact in any which way, there's some like very low bar for qualification from a marketing side. And that's from, if you think about the big wide range of prospects, hopefully you have a good enough understanding of the market and an account strategy. Whatever go to market you're running, a product led growth go to market strategy still should have an account strategy because you're still thinking about who your buyers are and what companies they sit at and how we get their attention. If all of that is in place, your MQLs, again, should still only be a certain percentage of your prospects. So if you look at the wide range of potential people you could sell to, let's say there's 10,000 buyers in your market, and you basically take any name or email that comes in through the front door and downloaded a white paper or attended a webinar or whatever and immediately passes them off to sales. Not cool in my view. Where I think there needs to be more intelligence done in the demand capture world, where you
Hmm.
have somebody who is interacting with a brand, downloading their papers, downloading their I don't know, other resources, interacting on their website, talking with people out on LinkedIn, is there needs to be more strategy and intelligence around figuring out what triggers for your company make sense to actually qualify them from a marketing perspective. And the way I like to do that is to look at your existing accounts and see what their behavior was, because we can make endless assumptions around what it means to download a white paper or what it means to attend a webinar. But if you notice that a high percentage of leads you get from webinars become closed won accounts, it's a great starting point. And also, you can look at the specific intent triggers or buying actions that people take in the marketing funnel that brought them from the webinar to talking to a salesperson, and also optimize for those things and also set up triggers for those things. So there's a lot of sort of infrastructure that can be built around looking at your existing accounts. And instead of making assumptions, you can you can just follow the lead and see how people are actually behaving. It's more of a data-based qualification, and I think there's a wide margin of error that can be made, but there needs to be a raising of the bar on the demand capture side
Mm-hmm.
to from passing along a name and an email from a marketing event to a salesperson. And the best way to do that is just to look at their activity and see how that lines up against other buyers, or at least that's the starting point.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have more freedom on your website, and I think you
Mhm.
need to look at what are the common questions that you're getting in a sales qualification meeting, and the stuff that makes sense where there's just it's black and white, where there is no gray area, where you're not doing a prescription, where you're not doing something collaborative. It's just this is kind of the rules, like even like price bands. I think that should be on the
Mhm.
website before they book so that it helps them have a better expectation of that. I want to loop back.
Can I do a soapbox really quick before you loop back to the question or comment?
Yeah.
Which is what I've seen recently, and this relates a lot to demand capture and what you just said.
Yeah.
If a predominant number of your sales qualification calls and you're disqualifying leads because the price is not in their range, put it on your website. Simple as that. You have I understand there's maybe a small niche of complex B2B sales that is customized that you can't put pricing on your website. And not everybody runs product-led growth, but even pricing bands, if you don't have a per seat model or whatever, helps customers disqualify themselves and
Mm-hmm.
save your sales team time. Because if you're not going to sell to them anyways for the price that they need, they're not the right customer. So if you review 100 sales qualification calls and a super majority or even a majority of them are around pricing and how that's not going to work for the client, put it on your website. That's like a great starting point to help improve your pipeline development.
Makes me think of retail when you walk in a store that you've never heard of before, and you're like,
Yes.
"Oh, that's pretty nice," and you look at a price tag and you're like, no, just kidding, we can't afford to be in here," or it's like, "Hmm, that's actually better than I thought," but
Yeah,
they should have that
exactly.
opinion walking into the store, walking into that meeting versus
Hmm.
not. Okay, ready for some comments?
Yep.
It's okay to set different close rates benchmark for different types of roles. Yes,
Mm.
150%. And why I agree with this is that outside sales should have a lower closing rate than inside sales. If not, there's a problem. Whatever your sales development or demand gen movement is, field marketing, either way, they should be starting with more trust. There should be more qualification. And so I would expect it to be significant, probably double or triple what you're seeing on outbound. And then also, I will throw customer success in here because they should be having something like a 95% retention ratio and maybe even looking at how many of their accounts grow over a certain set time period. But
Absolutely.
okay, what do we got next? I want to put Jonathan's comment in here. It just gave me such a good laugh. Wait, you guys get leads sent to you? That would be nice to have, even if not 100% qualified. I'd take any I could get. This
Such
this
a
is
good
so
comment.
common,
Yeah,
so
it's true.
common. There's a lot of full cycle people that they can't rely on marketing at all. It is just
Mm-mm.
them. And a lot of companies losing trade shows lost their only source. And so
Yeah,
now it's tough migrating to remote virtual when it's, you never had an inside sales department. You weren't used to not being in front of customers. And I think that's why knowing these numbers are so critical, because it allows us to take charge and not fall victim to our pipeline. We can actually go out and diagnose and figure things out. Like, for example, it's like, how do you know somebody's going to have a heart attack? What are you looking for? Well, on the surface, if they don't feel different and they don't see it, they don't feel it, it's not a problem. But if they go to the doctor and the doctor's like, holy cow, I have never seen somebody with cholesterol as high as yours, and like your blood pressure is skyrocketing. We need to make a change right away, or I'm worried I'll never see you again. This is the difference. A lot of customers are walking around not knowing they're on the brink of something bad happening or needing that change. We need to find the ones that we have to educate them through this process. And that's where those numbers come in, is what education is helpful versus what is they don't see a value in it, to get
absolutely.
them to that realization that they need to make a change themselves, not us forcing them to make a change.
Hmm.
And our goal is to help them figure out why now.
Yep. And it's also defined. I mean, even to extend that principle a little bit longer, especially if you're not able to do a prescription per se, you need to do this. And it's more of a transparent conversation. A lot of selling too is figuring out if there is a match right now. Because it could be that there's a match in the future, but maybe there's not a match right now. And Nick has gone through both in previous live shows and in workrooms with folks and other sorts of conversations we've had, like getting somebody to state the problem in their own words is like a great starting point for them to realize they even have a problem. And also, if they're not if you're targeting, I mean, there's definitely some conditions to this, but if you're targeting larger companies that have budget cycles and many layers of management, if they're not already spending money on the problem, it's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle because you're not just trying to find a champion, to medic earlier, to get somebody to say this is a great solution. You're also having to empower and enable them to also make the case that it's worthwhile spending money on this general area.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other battle. And so some of it is finding, where is the match? Is the match right now? Is the match in the future? What else can we support them with? Not every call or not every deal is going to be perfect right now, but it could be perfect 6 months from now, or perfect after the champion gets a budget approval next year. And obviously those are hard things for us to plan for and adapt to. And that's some of the challenge in navigating the sale. But just, nailing the fundamentals is a good start, and getting them to state the problem in their own words, especially if you can't prescribe it. But that's just a starting point. It's not necessarily like a guarantee that navigating the sale will be a lot easier. As we all know, there's a lot of people are interesting, man. They can go in all sorts of directions.
And people inquire at different times for information too. Sometimes they're inquiring because they know you're the fastest source to information. And so that's why they seek you out. Other times they are ready and they know they need to make a change, and so now they need somebody to provide a prescription and or collaborate with them on that solution. So
Absolutely.
we got to figure, that's kind of the hardest part, because then otherwise if they know what's going on, why not just have a buy now button on your website? Because obviously you've done such a great job educating them that you can just
Yeah,
focus on retaining them and making sure they see value. I want to pull up
exactly.
Kit's comment here. It's
Oh,
gold.
yes. How can we balance the push and pull from marketing and sales? Sales will always want more nurtured, qualified prospects, and marketing will always want more closed sales on the leads they send. When is it productive and when is it destructive? I think I'll add the qualification that in most organizations I talk to, marketing does not want more closed sales on the leads they send. They want more leads.
Yeah.
They want more exposure. They want more vanity metrics. I think it's a highly disciplined revenue team if you ever find a marketing team that wants more sales on their leads, or a demand gen team. That's not always the case, just to add like a qualification. But Nick, how do you want to do you have any thoughts on this? I've spoken a lot of marketing already, so
If I always like your layer cake analogy or
Mm.
stackable revenue. If we were to tear it from the ground, tear it down to the ground, burn it down, and rebuild it, sales doing outbound is fast. It works. That's why we do it. We can also be super highly targeted, should be super highly targeted when we're doing outbound because then it provides more value. Marketing should be casting a wider net than what we're doing in sales, getting more and more specific, but they should still have tight segmentation. So it plays on that. Well, if you know, because you're speaking that shop talk. And so it should resonate with who you're talking to. And it doesn't matter if it's a past customer or somebody that's just getting into your community, they should see value in it. And so the whole point of marketing is to help them understand why change, why now, why you, and nurture them through that process in a way that's not confrontational because change is hard. And so if we take them through that non-confrontational way and we're not trying to jam them in because oh, they downloaded this, obviously they want something, we don't get out of the way that we want to sell and look at the way they want to buy, then the push and pull of marketing is going to go and do the activities, be in the places, show up so people have trust knowing that you are a likable, credible source so that when that need comes up they will reach out to you. This does not happen quickly. It is not instant, and this is why it fails so miserably is people track it on a 1 2 3, they track it like it's sales,
Mm-hmm.
cause and effect, and when they don't see that direct correlation they kill it. My LinkedIn took 90 days before I really started to see something other than just getting more people liking and commenting stuff. When people started to actually direct message me and ask me questions. And I would say, when it hit about that 6 month to year mark, I think it's going to be really exciting because it'll build up so much more momentum where people are asking for more meetings and they're self-diagnosing and qualifying so that we get to go and do more of that higher level prescription and collaboration on that solution. And so
Absolutely.
how you balance it is you got to look at where you're adding real value and you need to go and track them in a way that is realistic. And a big part of that just comes down to timeline, and don't treat it like it's sales. And then honestly, it's a cultural thing. Marketing needs to be accountable for pipeline. If they're
Yep.
just jam packing leads through, sales are going to hate them. And most of the time, people overhire sales. And so,
I can tell you
sales,
that.
people love to get served leads, like Jonathan was saying. It's
Take some
just nice
leads.
when people want to talk to you and they book a meeting with you.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll always pick that versus doing the uncomfortable thing of trying to go and talk to people, especially when nobody's made it clear who they should be talking to or what a good fit looks like. So if we circle back, where does this all stem from? A lack of market knowledge.
What is a good fit? What are the accounts we should go after? Yep. The uh, what had just come to mind, and this is an extension of what Kit asked, but in a different way. And we've talked about this over this last week, Nick, as months, as we've begun to see what companies and clients are doing out there. I think that there are two kinds of pipelines. And I think a majority of companies sit in the first bucket. It may not be more than 60 or 70%, but it's definitely most. And then the other companies sit in the second bucket. And the first bucket is what I like to affectionately call the personality driven pipeline. And the personality driven pipeline is when you construct both metrics and stages of the pipeline that really cater to a particular manager's director's needs. And it would be difficult to communicate that pipeline and those pipeline benchmarks to an external audience. And the reason that companies do that is there's not a lot of knowledge out in the world about how to construct a pipeline and some of the data that we talked about previously of like good benchmarks and what it means to perform. So it's not it's more of a lack of good knowledge and out in the marketplace and a lack of training about how to construct this. But generally what happens in a personality driven pipeline is each stage is segmented weirdly. So you have, your prospects and your MQLs feeding into pipeline. So we've seen this before, where there are some companies out in the world that have any lead as a part of their pipeline, and as a result, their closing rate plummets.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and for me, that's very personality driven. That's just a decision some executive made once upon a time, said, hey, let's put every lead into the pipeline. To me, it doesn't make sense because they're just leads. They're not qualified. They're not necessarily a qualified opportunity. They may not actually contribute to revenue. They're just somebody who might or might not be interested. And
Mm-hmm.
so the second bucket is a performance driven pipeline, which some companies who are on top of their game use. And the performance driven pipeline do use benchmarks. They do construct it in a way that only looks at qualified opportunities. Now, it doesn't mean that the first stage in a pipeline is your 20% win, right? It could be a a discovery call. That's the gray area that Nick and I
Mm-hmm.
talked about. But more than likely, a majority of the performance driven pipeline is just focused on your opportunities. So the push and pull with sales is sales needs to build that pipeline, marketing needs to help build that pipeline. That should be really the goal there. We can trust sales to do their job. We need to train them to do their job. We need to help them do their job. But from a marketing perspective, my goal is not just to get more leads for a company or to get more names and emails on a list, but to find the patterns, the accounts, the personas, the intent data, etc., that drives those specific opportunities that end up in that first bucket in the pipeline. Because if you take a performance driven approach, that's where the magic starts happening. And if you take a personality driven approach, you don't know what the hell's going on. Basically. Right.
Yeah, well said. I'll pull up Jonathan's next comment here. When
Oh,
reviewing
yes.
closing ratios and comparing different geographic territories, do you know of any readily available tools to help compare demographics like industry, commercial density, and buying trends? I use the CRM for this. Anything where they're in pipeline, I use the CRM. Before pipeline, I usually use Sales Navigator or some type of intelligence software to segment. And so I know that you can go and build lists in HubSpot. I don't know if you're using Salesforce or which one you're using, Jonathan, but what you do is you use the criteria like that to build it out. I know you got to go and pick like a dominant category. So maybe you'll do geographic region. And then from there, you'll go and compare what industries in that region are closing more, what size. I've seen companies also build out pipelines based on deal size or sales cycle length. And so they'll segment deals based on something as well. It really depends on how you set yourself up, how you're tracking it. But most of the time, you can do that with a CRM. If you want to message me later, we could go and explore that together.
And just to reaffirm something, Nick, you had said earlier, there's always going to be variance.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be variance in closing ratios, comparing companies, comparing different things. The question is, to what degree do those closing ratios vary and why? And even so for example, that um if you have like a 2% difference in closing ratios, unless if you're at high volume, ah, who cares? It's 2%, whatever. Unless if you're but basically 2% matters if you're in e-commerce and you're a B2C company. Not only because you have thin margins, but that 2% at high volume is a lot of sales. But
Mm-hmm.
in B2B, when we're selling something a little larger, something a little slower, something a little more complex, 2% on a closing rate, nah. But if you're looking at 20% differentials, wow, that's a question. That's a consideration to have. And that order of magnitude makes a big difference because a 20% difference could be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost revenue, however you want to think about it. So even comparing the data is definitely more of an art than a science, and it's just trying to get a handle on what's actually going on. For me, it's always cool to see, like, okay, this city seems to perform better, but it's a bigger city than what we usually sell to, so there's probably more density. Like, that's a reasonable assumption. Is our closing ratio a magnitude higher than elsewhere? No, it's like 4 or 5% different. Okay, that's within reason. So it's not. Don't get too hung up on the details. Is my recommendation.
Going back to Kit's comment of when is it destructive,
Hmm.
they used to build a lot of houses on spec, and they would assume the house was or the market was going to grow at a certain rate. companies do this on a hope and a prayer, and they pull out arbitrary numbers that have nothing to do with market trends. And so say the market contracted 6% and they're expecting to grow at 50%. So what do? They look at their go-to-market and they look at how they're going to make up that difference. And so sometimes they'll push their reps harder. Maybe they'll buy a software. Most of the time they just hire more people. But what they do is they don't scale based on like the performance of an individual rep. They look at how much they assume they'll need to get to that point, and they'll overhire typically, especially after a funding round. And so where this pressure comes from, not only do they want more leads because it's easier work and they don't know who to talk to, but you're not scaling the company based off of production. You're scaling the company off a future that you're trying to sell. And
Yep.
so one of the things I've seen high performance companies do is they actually have a pipeline of people as well. And so they nurture this process over 30, 60, 90 days, and they're very respectful and honest with these people. But then they know how many people they need to hire at what time, if it's more marketing, if it's more sales, customer success, and that's how they do it. But they also take these numbers and they look at ramp. So you hired a new rep. Where are they starting from? What is their starting point? And where do they need to be to go and keep up with the rest? And so that can be part of your ramp as well, so that you can individualize that program and work with them and train them in a way that is meaningful. So a lot of this, like when it comes right down to it, this number doesn't matter unless you're using it for something productive. But the reality is so many people use closing rate as a means to fire or punish. And this is why sales suffers in silence, is because there is no reason to be honest with our managers, because our managers aren't actually in it for us. And so we need to change this culture so that we are working as a team. Same with sales and marketing. You know, if marketing thinks all sales is going to tell them is what you're doing sucks, you know, why would they want to work with us? And vice versa. We have to have this open channel of communication where we're working as a team and that it's supported by both teams and nobody's talking shit behind their backs, because all they're going to do is have a great conversation and then go and do nothing right after.
Totally. Yep. Absolutely. Do you want to pull up Kit's recent comment? Because I think this adds color
Yes.
too. This is very common. To help clarify, our sales team and marketing team used to bicker all day about how the leads from marketing aren't qualified. Just because they visited the site doesn't qualify them. While the marketing team worked to validate their work, saying the sales team wasn't working the leads, not nurturing them in the right way to close the sale. So this is something that happens at just about every company we've talked to. It's not an uncommon issue. The reality, for me at least, the very basic is that for companies that encounter this problem, it's marketing and sales are judged on two different metrics, and so the carrot and the stick for each team is different. And taking instead a revenue intelligence approach or a RevOps approach, or however, looking at total revenue helps incentivize the teams to do better. Now, does that resolve inter-turf wars? No, of course not. But I do think that it is on sales managers, directors, and leadership to help, and also marketing directors and leadership, to help bridge these gaps and help see what's going wrong. Honestly, more than anything, what Nick and I have encountered, and Nick, you can disagree with this, but I hear this so much, it's when the company itself, both marketing and sales, do not have the right amount of knowledge of the market and the accounts that they're going after and the competitive intelligence to be able not only just to know the difference between your competitors and have that filter into sales calls or have that filter into marketing copy, as well as the positioning that you have to develop as a result of that competitive intelligence and an understanding of the accounts that you'd like to sell to. If that stuff isn't in place, the specific tactics that a particular sales rep take or a particular marketing specialist takes on a campaign are going to make marginal impact on the pipeline. The real impact, the leverage point, comes from that market knowledge. If you know that based on sales conversations, based on research, based on marketing insights and all the rest, that you are targeting a particular persona at a company in X industry that's at a certain revenue percentage, and they tend to look for 1, 2, 3 different things, Not only should that be in your marketing copy, but that's also going to show up in your sales conversations.
I'm
And that also
so
leads to
glad you
better
brought this up,
conversations.
Morgan.
Yes.
What about intent?
Mm,
Not on the individual side. What is the intent of the marketing? What is the intent of
mhm.
the sales call? People have, they call it, what do you call it, their spidey senses. Because
Yeah.
the reason that I'm calling today, we
Your
filter
extended car
phrases.
warranty.
We filter phrases because we need to judge quickly. It's a survival instinct that we built thousands of years ago. And so
Mhm.
the intent of a lot of marketing is, it's not marketing. It's actually just digital sales. It's
Yeah.
promotional garbage. And so when your intent is, they see your, we'll call it social content, but it's really just a promo or an ad. They assume you're just going to click it and go buy. So this is also the disconnect, is marketing isn't marketing. It's selling through digital channels. And so when we change the intent, it's the same reason with a cold call. Most cold calls, the intent is to sell. So this is why reps dive into like vicious value propositions that aren't valuable and
Yeah.
piss people off. If the intent is to educate and to see if they're willing to change or if there's a certain psychographic fit, it changes the whole call,
Mhm.
because the intent wasn't to sell them on the phone. It was to see if there was a fit to get them into a meeting, a scheduled time to meet. So, what we actually need to do is take a step back, Kit, and please let me know if you do this with your team. But look at the intent of your marketing. Look at the past 5 posts. And if you'll see this really easily in Sales Navigator when you go and pull a lead list, look at what they're posting. Most people blankly reshare crappy company posts that mean nothing to customers. They're it's just a justification of actually posting. And so you look at the intent of that, the intent, it doesn't do anything because it wasn't intended to.
Right.
It was intended to teach employees that they have a new promotion. Instead of going to the Monday morning sales meeting, they put it out on social media for all of them to see.
Yeah.
But we have to take that step back. And not only, like Morgan said, it's so critical to know our market, but we also need to know what our intent is with each interaction, so that also that timeline, that starting point is relevant, just like our closing rate on the title.
Mhm.
They do say it's 2 to 3 times pipeline, 2 to 3 times that. If you were tracking from the point they're qualified to the point that you close one, it's 2 to 3 times that length on average, posting good content that's education first. That is the intent, is to educate buyers, because only 3% of people are in market at any given time. So they say. And with
Mhm.
that, only about 40% would be willing to change if it made sense. And this is what we're doing. But this isn't 30 days. It's not 60 days. It could be a year.
Mhm.
It could be 18 months. But
Mhm.
if you're still seeing bickering, challenge the intent and make sure that you can get alignment on all parties.
Right. And we've discussed this on I know we've discussed this on some previous shows, but just to restate this for posterity's sake, marketing needs to get better at understanding behavior on a site and what buyers actually want. And this is
Mm-hmm.
why, in my view, ungating content is a good thing right now, because buyers just want ungated content. They just want to know. And the reason is because there's competition in the marketplace. And so other buyers are ungating their content. And so if they have to put in their name and email to reach your stuff, but they can reach your competitor's stuff without putting in their name and their email, they're probably just going to read their competitor's stuff. And that's because you understand your buyers. That's because you know buyers don't want to do that anymore. And obviously market trends and insights are important, but because all of us on this live show and people we talk to in our own worlds work in different industries, there's going to be little nuances when it comes to our industry. There's going to be little stuff that some person in fintech doesn't know about selling specialized APIs. That's like a B2B SaaS product, and that's fine. It's getting to know who you're trying to buy to and what they need. And chances are, right now, at a broad blanket statement, sending them a weekly newsletter is not going to help them. Sending them a nurture sequence in their email probably not going to help them unless if it's like a high intent specific offer. They only want it. But then marketing teams go and abuse that. And then they keep on sending stuff after they've sent them the original thing. And that's horrible. And then you lose trust and brand equity and people tune you out. So then when the sales rep reaches out to that company, they're like, somebody else from this company wants to talk to me. Yeah, right. I don't have time to do that. So it's to Nick's question, what is the purpose of these activities, whether it's the purpose of the sales call, the discovery call, the qualification call, the purpose of putting out gated content versus ungated content. All it is just to serve the buyer. That's all we have to do. And it's very simple. It's not easy because we don't know enough about our buyers most of the time. And not just talking to customers, but also doing market research, also reviewing your one lost accounts, also talking with your existing customers, also talking with your competitors. That's a great place to start building the insight to understand what your buyers actually want. The reason that lemonade sales work on a street corner in a residential neighborhood is because everyone around there wants to support the little kid selling lemonade. It's not because the lemonade is any better than the lemonade they can buy at the store. It's the same lemonade. But people are bought into that idea that they should probably support their neighbor's kids in learning a little thing about money and learning a little thing about having a lemonade stand. Same goes for all of our industries. The reason it works is because we serve people and we serve what they need in their companies and in their work life. And all we have to do is match that, understand it, and serve it. And I wish it was easy, like we could wake up tomorrow and do that. But that's like a compass for me. Like, what do they need? I don't know. Let's go find out. Soapbox, wherever it went.
Wherever it
I'm
went.
dismounting.
I'm going to pull up this from Jonathan. And please, this is the time. If you
Oh
guys have any
yeah.
questions, comments, throw them in here. This is the perfect time for us to dive in. Give us scenarios, give us stories. Let's get it in here because this is how we learn together. I work for a company that actually forced us to reshare their branded content daily. So if you shared a contact with, say, 10 colleagues that contact the same post and then 10 times, yeah,
I refused and posted content that was industry relative without my former company's logo on it. I would too.
yeah. The thing is, and this is the funny part, and I've heard this said a few times, good salespeople aren't idiots. We see what's not working because we're in the grinding every day, boots on the ground. When something doesn't work, we know. So if we see, I think that honestly, the real reason why more salespeople are moving to marketing is because it works. What did somebody tell me the other day? Oh, yeah, your brand is your SDR.
Mm. So good.
That one just resonates so well because it works. It books meetings for you. But your company's garbage content, what's the point? What is the point of following you? If they trust you and they want to go and hear from you, if you don't add your own spin on that content, there's no value in it because then they just might as well follow the company page and get that. But what they want to know is your curation of that. How do you feel about it? Why do you care? Because you are their voice. You are the one that's taking the garbage, filtering it through, and like, this is why you guys should care about this. And that is why people follow each other on LinkedIn or any social platform, is that curation. Or what is the intent? Well, I go and follow TikTok because I just want to laugh, or I follow your YouTube channel because I just want to go and dive into the specific topics I have questions about. Why do you guys follow us? Is it because you want to book more meetings? Is it because you want to close more sales? Seems to be the
Mm-hmm.
most common too. You want to get better on LinkedIn? Let us know too, and we'll go and produce more of that content. But yeah, we can't do that. We got to change the intent if we want to change our numbers.
Mm-hmm.
We, and use those numbers as guides to go and drive all of that. I was saying to a colleague the other day that one of the things I miss so much in sales is account strategy and deal reviews. When was the last time you sat down with your sales manager or leadership to be part of the strategy? How are we working this account? I don't know if I told you this, Morgan. I tried a new strategy where I was looking at how many hours I could apply based on the deal size. And I looked
Mm.
at the margins, so approximate margins on that deal. And I gave a time allocation. And on that time allocation, I applied my go to market and I looked at, okay, how much time can I afford to be on cold calls? How much time can I afford to go and directly message and comment on LinkedIn? When we do this, now it becomes a system. Now it can be tracked. It doesn't need to be impersonal though. It just means we're being accountable to making sure that the business is profitable. That's all.
Absolutely.
And it works really well because there's no guesswork anymore. Oh, you
Hmm.
have identified that target account. Well, it's $250,000 sale, 10%, 5% margin, so I can put in 5 hours. Okay, how am I going to invest those 5 hours to get the result we need?
Right.
And quickly, how do I get in, spend those first like half an hour, 15 minutes to make sure that it's even worth pursuing this deal at all? And I think that's
Yes.
missed by too many companies.
Absolutely. And all of this relates back to our headline question from today as well, which is, what is an acceptable closing rate on sales? And I mean, we've gone through the answer on this show already, so we don't need to restate that. But the reality for me, and I get to say this as somewhat of a distanced partner on this, because in my world, having been an entrepreneur for however long, like I'm my own salesperson, and so there's a certain percentage I see, but it's not the same. So to interact with sales teams where they are assigned certain quotas and they are assigned certain activity metrics and vanity metrics that are, in my view, part of the personality driven pipeline, it results in all sorts of skewed incentives and not a lot of strategic thought around what does this mean for our bottom line? What does this
Mm-hmm.
mean for our company? And like, okay, great, we could boost closing rates from 19% to 22%, and that would make a substantial impact on our bottom line, for example. However, there's not, doing more of the same is not necessarily the best path to that success. There are alternative ways that Nick has brought up, not just like social selling and other ways of getting in front of your customers, but also different metrics to track as well.
Mm-hmm.
And having considerable thought around not just the ROI on an individual salesperson in the team and what that means for the bottom line and how much time it takes to win a client and investing too much in an individual sale, but also thinking through comprehensive and strategic ways to know your customer better. And like sales gets that just by doing their job,
Mm-hmm.
but there's more strategic ways to review and share that information and build revenue intelligence that could drive a performance driven pipeline between marketing and sales, like we've been talking about. Anyways.
Yeah, and as you guys are diving into the podcast over the next little bit, I'll burst the bubble here.
Oh, yes. Go for it.
We're going to be diving into market research. We're going to be looking at account strategies. We're going to dive into how to figure out which personas you should be talking to and going through these qualifications and even diving into medic and other qualification frameworks because we realize it's such a gray area and that it's missing. And even going back in my all my recent experiences, it's the hardest thing for a new agent to jump into is to know who you should be talking to. So if we can add clarity to such a gray topic, it's going to help a lot of people. So watch on the podcast. We're going to be diving in. We're doing an expert series to actually talk to the people that know a lot about this instead of just
Hmm.
stating our opinions and
Well informed ones, but
informed
still.
ones. But fair enough. Yeah, we're gonna dive into it with different experts and pull it together for you guys. And who knows, maybe you'll get a guide out of it at the end.
Yeah, something like that.
A cheat
Thank you,
sheet.
everyone, for joining today. Happy Friday. And I hope everyone took away something. If there's any questions, please DM us on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to have a conversation, I know, and explore this further for your company or for a specific situation you're encountering. And otherwise, as Nick always says, happy selling.
Happy selling. Take care.